So, yeah. So there's so if anyone else has any comments on this topic, I know a lot of people are probably don't want to call in about this topic because it is politics. It is very controversial. What people don't really want to hear and talk about this stuff. But it's open for you guys to actually vocalize and tell us how you feel about it. The number.
And it is a controversial show. Remember, it is controversial.
That is what it is. You guys
That's
don't want to talk.
what we do here.
Exactly. If you guys want to talk about it publicly, here's the place you want to talk it about. So, anyway, we're going to go into some music real quick, and hopefully we'll get some people calling in. The number you want to call is 360-464-4216, and we're based out here in Seattle. And I'm going to play SGL, Demon Love.
You got something that
Super Geek League, the band that I roll with, who will be here next Wednesday. So excited. And I have on the phone with me, I got my brand new co-host, Greg, also known as Spider in the Hall.
Yes.
And we are talking about politics.
We sure are.
Through music.
We definitely are.
Go ahead.
Politics, to begin with, is already kind of like a really touchy subject. Like, there's so many directions you can go with it, and you almost don't want to, because you don't want that one person to call in and be like, you shouldn't say that about something, and I'm angry, and you horrible people.
Yeah.
But
you know what? Go for it, you know?
Exactly. Just go ahead and it makes things interesting. Just say what's on your mind. It's funny how when we talk about politics through music, a lot of times you talk about more like the protest songs, things like that, but it can go the other direction too. Like in the early days of the Iraq War, of course, and there was a lot of patriotism going around. You had big country musicians who were writing these big songs about going to war and kicking down doors and things, like Toby Keith kicking in doors and taking the fight to the terrorists and things like that. So you can get politics at the other end of the spectrum, where it's for certain things rather than against certain things.
Like what?
Well, for example, with Toby Keith, you had support for the war, whereas on the other end of the spectrum, you had people, of course, we mentioned Rage Against the Machine, who were against the war. There are bands, like there's a band right now by the name of Filter, the lead singer, Richard Patrick, who is a Cleveland native, actually. He himself's pretty vocal about how politics are. He's very anti-conservative, and he's put out probably their last 2 or 3 albums have had a lot of really heavy anti-war sentiments and really anti-conservative kind of outlooks. And the thing about politics with musicians nowadays is, now that you have social media, it gives everyone an opinion about that, and it's interesting to see just how many people will agree with a musician and how many people just on the other end will be very vigorously angry about the musician having political views at all.
Yeah, I guess I can see that point. For example, getting away from the musicians for a second, the presidency here, who's running for president, there is a lot of hatred toward Donald Trump, me included. And one of my favorite actors is actually supporting him, thinking he's in the right direction. I forgot his name, which is not important because he's supporting Trump. But anyway, he wants to support Trump because he thinks Trump is a great idea. But the problem is Scott Baio. Scott Baio is supporting Trump. But if I remember correctly, Scott Baio is actually not American. I think he's from I think he's Mexican. I think. Don't quote me wrong. I might be wrong on that. His family was an immigrant, I think.
I'll take a look here.
Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking. And so anyway, that came out about a couple of months ago that Scott Baio was supporting Trump. And then again, after that, just a few days ago, Enemy is supporting Bernie. Which, Enemy is also a very outspoken young man for being who he is. And he puts it in his music, how outspoken he is.
Mm-hmm. And that's the big thing about how information is in the world today. We're probably always going to keep going back to this social media topic about how politics spreads and how opinions about politics spreads. And if you take a look at people like, say, like right now you see Bernie Sanders. He doesn't have a lot of necessarily top of the hill political support from a lot of the establishment politicians, but he has a lot of support from grassroots, from local people, from a lot of smaller organizations all together. And you had the same thing with Ron Paul before that a few years ago. And one thing that they had that some of the bigger, like more established candidates don't have is that they have, for example, folk musicians who will go to their rallies and sing songs and promote their things without a lot of violence, but still very vigorous, like very aggressively. Whereas you don't get that as much with some of the larger candidates, at least here in the United States. You don't see. You'll see musicians have opinions about these things, and they might be talking about current politics through a song, but they won't necessarily have specific performances in favor of candidates.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to see that kind of thing. It's interesting to see that these people who you made several years ago before social media existed, you might not even know that they really paid attention to these things. You kind of think of musicians and actors and celebrities in general as kind of separate from everybody, and it turns out that they're just as passionate as the rest of us about things like politics and about political candidates.
Well, I think that reason because that like celebrities like Hollywood and musicians, they're so way out there on top of the world that we see them in stars and glamorous, and you never really thought they even had an opinion of a thought, because that's what people want to think they didn't have them because they're God or whatever. But when you listen to them and talk to their point of view on politics, and they're on certain things that they creative, they can actually give a different kind of point of view and a different direction on what they believe in. And I was doing some research again, and I noticed that Elvis Presley was a very big, very into the politics. Of course, he's actually served the military, but I don't think he really fought anything. But I don't think he fought anything only because he had that stardom of who Elvis Presley was. He's king of rock and roll. So so his opinion count a lot. Like all the other musicians that people want to admire and to look up to, every single musician and celebrity out there has a responsibility to, talk to their opinion, and maybe people agree, maybe people won't agree, disagree. Kind of, that's my look at anything.
It's kind of an interesting way that all of these things have changed, especially over the last few decades. Especially since, let's talk about Sinead O'Connor for a minute, from the '80s, of course, and ripping a picture of the Pope in half. You get these musicians making these very big statements now on stage, and a lot of times people aren't prepared for that anymore. Like they again see these artists and these celebrities as they're just these people behind glass, they're separate from us, they just they entertain us. But then you might go to a show, or you might go to a talk where they're promoting a movie or whatnot, and they'll go into a topic and they'll start talking about they might start talking about political candidates, or they might start talking about an issue like, say, pro or anti-abortion or something like that, and it catches us off guard almost. Like we're not sure how to handle that anymore, because we didn't have that for so long.